Okay, I'm going to ask Martin to come back up, and we're going to be joined by Tom Fisk, Principal Solution Architect of Yokogawa, and Joris Ostman, Client Sales Executive with Schneider Electric. Hopefully you're thinking about questions. You've got 3 seconds. 2, 1. We got a question. Do we have a microphone? Okay. Can you give it to Valentin?
Peter, listening to your presentation, I get the impression that the British are really kids in terms of understatements. You mentioned an information model from the DCS up to the ERP. That can be a very important undertaking, and I don't think that's really simple. Could you elaborate a little bit? Did you use any standards? Have there been many discussions about how that information structure should look like? Do you use it to communicate with suppliers or with service providers? There are many aspects to information modeling. It's a subject that seems to gain more and more traction, so I'm very interested in hearing about it.
Pick up the mic. Oh. Should be on.
Valentine, thanks for the question. We are not as big as a lot of companies who are here, and we have a hands-on mentality. So we put on the different guys from the different factories together, from the guys from the ERP system, and we use some international standards. But we picked them from our factory in Germany. That was a foreign Danisco factory, and they were heavily infected by some standards there. So that was for us the best practice in Suikerunie. But it was also one of the power. I had to bring some power in some discussions. They want some things that were really stupid when you don't know what's something about automation. So it was a hurdle. Yeah, but we are not as big, so it was not complicated.
Okay, but there was some discussion, I can imagine. And what was the inspiring standard? Was it ISO 15926 or?
I really don't know the number.
No?
No.
You can look it up, no problem. Thank you so much.
Next. Anybody? There we go.
Yes, Armando Lara from Lyondell Basel. This question is for Marty. Marty, actually a couple questions.
Great customer, by the way.
Yes, I know. We like you too. A couple questions.
Yeah.
Can you give us some idea of the level of proliferation of the Prism application across your sites? That's number one. And number two, why did you choose to use a specialized tool like Prism instead of using a free-form open analytics machine learning tool that will allow your engineers to program openly and that sort of thing?
Good question. We are putting it in at a rapid pace. I'm not running that actual program. What I'm doing is I'm working with that program manager to ensure that the infrastructure is there, that the communication protocols are there and standard. There has been a major push to get it in as many plants. I would say exact numbers, it's pretty high in terms of the number of plants that we actually have it employed. The selection of Prism and the program originated in France. We are following their program. We didn't come up with it. I understand your question about why is it we're not using another type. Primarily, it came from our French office in this particular case, and since we needed to turn it around really quickly and start getting benefit, and we've seen a lot of benefit from it, that's why we chose to use that, because to go out on your own, then you have to have time to research. And you lose time because of, the customers like you. We want to get it in quick. We want to be able to be proactive and not impact the Lyondell's. But I can't answer exactly why they picked it, because that came to a different group. I'm supporting that particular group.
Okay. We got another one? Okay.
This question's for Peter. I was looking at your slides and noticed that as part of your journey, you addressed standard operating procedures. Didn't elaborate on that a whole lot. How is that part of your digital transformation journey for your facility? Manual SOPs.
Now we had some very smart and good operators in the factory, and they were part of the team that was writing the new specification for the process automation. So a lot of things we did in the past manually are now also procedural, fixed in our process automation. So that's the standard operating procedures we have now. And the next step we have to do is the hand actions who are still there, also making it more written down.
Okay. Yeah, we can't hear you though.
Since nobody else is asking questions, a follow-on question to Peter then. Do you see opportunity, now you've increased the level of automation through the DCS platform, but there still remains a number of manual procedures that exist. Do you see any opportunities for synchronization of digitized procedures with the process control system?
I see a lot of opportunities, but you have to choose which one you are going to do.
Right.
And that's also one of the sheets was that we are now optimizing. We are first optimizing the workload of our operators and our technicians, and I think that would be the next step.
I agree, by the way.
If I can add, that applies also to my industry as well. When we're starting up plants and we're looking at the same type of thing, I have a deep batch background, and trying to tie the procedures, if you will, to the control system. There's a gap right now in industry of what we're looking for, because we want full circle of that and then the automation part all integrated. And there's some that are out there that are really good to drive procedures but don't drive the control system, and then there's others that are good at driving the control system but they don't link the procedures. There's a gap, hint, vendors, that need to be solved. Because if we solve that, then it's applicable to almost any industry that has some procedural-based code. And if the vendors can crack that one, I'll be first in line to get that, because it's huge.
Okay, next.
Yes, hi, this is Grace Capwell, and I'm with Emerson. And I want to thank you for sharing today. I really appreciate it. For your challenges, I was wondering if you had a couple of specific examples of challenges around people and how you might have taken a new or different approach as you took on the overall modernization projects. Thank you.
Marty, you're talking to me specifically, or in general, the whole panel?
Well, in general, the whole panel. And just specifics about taking on the changes that your people are going to be having to deal with, because we all know it's important, but we don't hear a lot about specifics that you might have done. And I know it was important to both of your projects. So, yeah, anyone on the panel can advise. Thanks.
I can answer from some recent projects that we're doing right now. With the tools we selected, we get better. There's actually better electronic information. There's better stuff out there. So we're taking some of that and forming, a lot of our people like to have specific training on their system, not the general classroom, this is how the Delta V works, or this is how the the Yoko works. They want, how does Yoko work for us here? And so we're building out some specific training modules. I'm reaching out to our training department because it's easier to come up with smaller YouTube-ish type things. I've got a couple people in my department, especially with the training on the Yokogawa pace, that developed small YouTube videos that teach people how this thing really works. Creative, and that's the millennials doing that. For me, it's just like, here's a slide and listen to me. But I'm learning. I'm learning to do that, and I think that that's a great way to go. But it's not as solid as it needs to be. We have to continue to grow and get better.
We had a different approach in the process automation change. It was more a top-down decision for some parts of it. And for instance, the philosophy situation awareness was not directly chosen from the operators. They were heavily involved by how we did it, but now not in the choice for that we did it. So we took a long time to explain the reason why. We also made some training about with a psychologist to explain and to do something about teamwork and so on, and what's happening when you are overwhelmed by a lot of information and colors and so on. So that were the steps, and we gave them not much room to changes. That was one of the top-down decisions in our factory. But with other parts, we did it completely different. It was very bottom-up, and we had a vision. We shared a vision, and we gave them tools. And in that part, we have to be carefully that it don't explode in a lot of good actions. But we must do something about project management and pick the right things to do. But that gives another dimension about how do you do it together.
Okay, we have a question down here. See, what they're doing, Alan, is they're finding where you are and then raising their hand if they're the furthest away.
So this is actually a question for Marty. Hi, Marty. How are you doing? Oh, well.
I always like your question.
So the question is, now that you've implemented PACE globally, right? It's a multi-part question, so let me phrase that correctly. Now that you've implemented PACE globally, how do you leverage simulations to train operators to perform better and/or detect anomalies? And B, how are you tying simulations done in PACE with your modernization program to kind of get the best of both worlds? Are you doing something like that? Are you doing an integrated approach?
So PACE comes with a really solid simulation package that you can build scenarios, you can use it to train. But since it's such a paradigm shift for most operators, it's not necessarily in the form it is the best way. Okay, so what we have done, I employ a rocket scientist in my group, and I say that because the kid's the smartest engineer I think I've ever met. He is developing those integrated simulations with the process, and he's got it almost done to where it's self-contained, and we're using that to train the operators. But we're still also learning improved ways to bring training to operations, because that's a whole nother level of investment on top of the actual work you're doing. And so we're having, and that's not so as easy to do as the actual work. So it's a challenge, but we're almost there. I think it's going to be released this week, actually, and it's pretty novel. It's a pretty cool thing.
Now we are doing that very basically. Our factory is half a year not operating, so we can do in a not operating factory a lot of learning. So we don't need that kind of things. For instance, we do it at our boiler house in our electricity power generation. We have also simulation, but it's only part for our factory.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll ask. Oh, you got one? Oh, he's got more.
So the second thing is, now that you have all this field data coming in, I noticed that the sugar factory had, these handhelds. Marty has handhelds. But have you all tried giving these handhelds to actual instrument techs? And have you tried using these handhelds during commissioning and startup to minimize startup times or commission from the field? What are your experiences with that, and what do you think we shouldn't do?
I can answer that. Yes, we're doing it on our new LMA plants. They got the tablets, started rolling that out. They're actually trying it at other different plants. What we shouldn't do is at the plant level go off on your own and do your own thing and then come back and talk to IT after. That you shouldn't do. And ensure, because you need to ensure that the products that you're buying that are industrialized, you get everything working well. Good feedback so far on them that I'm seeing. And as we're modernizing the systems that we're using, have a lot more apps on them, and as we're starting to install the new control system, if you are the upgraded one, and it's Emerson, it's a Delta V, they have some really outstanding apps, especially in the I/O area, where you can just go up and show the camera to existing modules, and it'll tell you exactly what the problem is. So we used it in Washington, the state of Washington, when we commissioned that plant recently, and it was very helpful.
It gives a lot of more insights at the right place. So the response time for fixing a problem is much more. It's much better. So let's do it.
I'd like to tag on that question. So, technicians generally, they wear gloves. They tend to get dirty, their hands dirty. Are you having issues with the tablets in that way?
I don't have the direct feedback because they don't come to me. I haven't heard, all I've heard is success. Now, they like it, it's being utilized. I don't have a lot of usage data because I don't get once it gets into the plants tend to own those things, and they haven't fed back much in a negative way to me yet. I haven't heard it. So I'm going to say I don't know enough yet.
Okay.
Some persons are having dirty hands, but that's also a problem when you have to go to the control room and search for in a computer. So that's, for me, the same. So.
That's a fair statement. Questions? I'm going to ask another one.
I would like to ask one. For those out there that are willing to share, what are some of the returns you've seen on any of your, pick something, doesn't have to be elaborate, because I always like to hear what others are doing too, because obviously we're doing the best we can where we're at, but it's always nice to hear from others what they're doing, because we're all kind of doing this together. If someone is willing to share something, that would be great.
I guess it's the...
Guhan, I'm going to put you on the spot. because I know you're doing good stuff. Okay.
Thank you, Marty. So, Marty and I know each other, so we're not strangers to each other.
I figured.
So we keep asking each other harder questions. So at the end of the day, the hardest question has to buy drinks. So, so 3 years ago, I kind of was entrusted with modernizing a plant by my company. I was a project manager, everything. So the decision I made was not to give the handhelds to the operator. I gave the handhelds to the instrument techs. And yes, the operators hated me for it, but the instrument techs loved me for it. And what I did was I was metricizing for the last 10 to 12 years. I've been metricizing cutover times. So I think the fastest we got per loop without the handhelds was about 34 minutes a loop. That's, determining the wires, terming, shooting the loop, and everything else. So with the handhelds in the field, we developed some little simple Excel spreadsheets with macros in them that would take the I/O list, and then it would categorize them into units. And what I did was I gave each one of these handhelds out to the techs, along with the commissioning guys, and said, run off. You handle this area, you handle this area. So a little check, And we managed to drop commissioning times down from 34 minutes to 14 minutes a loop. So that was a quantifiable reduction in essentially the turnaround time. Because as Marty says, customers are most important thing, and that was one thing. The second thing we've noticed is we had severe limitations on our OPC because some of our plants were so old, and they were using OPC 1.0 or pre-1.0 DA. We had bottlenecks in terms of expanding I/O and severe OPC limitations as to how much data it could move back and forth. So I've justified a lot of projects based on putting APC on top of these projects and justifying I/O increases, better productivity that way. And for example, one of the projects we needed APC on, it was going to reduce, we have something called approach to flammability. And our APC pushes that constraints higher and higher, closer to, the further away you are, the less productivity you have. The closer you are to the AFL, the more productivity, but you don't want to touch that line, So we needed a lot of I/O, and the control system just wasn't there. So I used that project to justify the modernization. And as I think the numbers that you had mentioned in your slide earlier, I think we surpassed that. And we were very close to what Marty says, 1 year ROIs are normal, and productivity gains are just fantastic. And the third most important thing I've noticed is all these kids coming in, man, they like cool stuff, So the moment there was one guy I know, he graduated from Urbana-Champaign, one of the smartest kids I know, and he asked to work on my project, and I was surprised. I'm like, why? He's like, man, you're giving out the school handhelds? I can go out in the field and I can actually learn something while I commission. And, I said, yeah, run with it. And I think tools are the name of the game, and to retain talent and to improve talent, you've got to give everybody the right tools. And
I'll second that, because some of the modernization that I'm looking at isn't necessarily for who's there today. It's to also entice and keep good young talent as well. And when you don't modernize, nobody really wants to deal with you. They look at you as a dinosaur, and we've heard that before. That's not a big deal. Just because you can keep a 30-year-old control system going, okay, that might give you an ego boost, but the guy coming behind that's really young is not really wanting to deal with that if they can help, because they can't transfer that knowledge to their next as easily. So, you have to also look at who's going to be your next supporters of the system, and if you have a chance to do it right, you go for it and do it. You don't do it just to do it, obviously, but you have to have your right justification. But that's helping justify some of us. There's a push for that in Air Liquide.
Marty, I had a testimonial earlier this morning in my session by Pioneer Natural Resources, oil and gas company in Texas. They use self-service analytics capable to detect patterns and to get alerts on patterns happening. And they don't have an ROI here, but they say tens of millions annually from improved business and operational outcomes, including improved subject matter expert / engineer productivity, faster time to insight from all types of operational data, production increases, maintenance, prevention of maintenance events, equipment failures, and so on, improves ability to capture and retain prized know-how from increasingly scarce subject matter experts and share it across the organization. So it gives at least some indication.
There's no doubt that it's out there. One of the benefits of having a program somewhat established, although may be others out there that can do it, is you don't have to rethink it and you can mobilize quick and you can get help because it's known across the company worldwide. And there's times when we have to pull people in to help us do this, especially in understanding, analyzing how to deal with this. And every day we waste, although it's not considered necessarily waste, of looking at something different that's not getting us down the line quicker. That would be a tough sell in my company right now, especially because it came from the head office, is to look at something different at this point. It's not saying we can't, but what's more important, those that have nothing, we got to get something quickly. And we've saved quite a bit of money so far. Can it be better? Sure. But thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. So I noticed that in the conversations that you had and the presentations you gave, didn't talk anything about cybersecurity. Was that did that play? How was that figured into your projects?
For us, that was one of the basics we have found, but that was in the foundation. So that was one of the things we look very careful for. Yeah. It was a cooperation between our IT department and the guys from Schneider. Yeah.
Okay.
I cut slides out. There were things on that because that's a whole topic, but yeah, we had to, absolutely. And I was one of the people that were part of the development of the what we call our general technical guideline, our digital security plan, and a lot of what we chose had to adapt to that. I probably should have said that, but absolutely. Cybersecurity played a major role in everything that we chose.
Did you feel like it changed your design?
For sure.
Okay.
Yes, it did, because there were simpler ways to do something, but that simpler way is not as secure as doing it the right way.
You have to look every modification carefully what's happening in your plans, because you make sometimes a backdoor. So it's very necessary to look very carefully every time.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? Everybody's looking at their phone. Do you want to end it, or do you want more questions?
There's more questions. This stuff, I love this stuff, so I can talk all night on it.
How about this? During your projects, what was the biggest obstacle?
Which one? I got 8 of them.
Yeah, that's right. You got 8 of them. I forgot you were doing multiple.
Pick one.
How about you pick one of the biggest
DCS
obstacles?
modernization, the one that makes me lose sleep at night. I had a full head of hair before it started. The biggest challenges are when you're getting involved in a brownfield replacement, is finding enough quality documentation that describes what you're doing. Because anything that lacks, you've got to reverse engineer. That costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of time. And then understanding that you can build a framework without having to solve the whole thing all at once, knowing that you pick the right system that you can build on, because sometimes the costs are so astronomical to do it that even I have a hard time justifying looking at some of that. Like, oh, geez, I don't know if we should. It is a good thing to do, but keeping focused and keep reasonable, because these things are expensive. And when you're standing in front of people that want to know why you're spending so much money, you better have a solid justification or you're going to get beat up.
Peter?
For us was the hardest part to free up the right persons to write the engineering, to do the reverse engineering. That was our own people had to do that in close cooperation with the vendor, but that was sometimes a headache.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I'm the luckiest manager, I believe, because I've got the longest tenured person currently in Air Liquide. 46 years. He works for me. The guy is 60-some, late 60s, and he acts like he's about 20. He loves what he does, and he's a master at reverse engineering some of our more complex systems. All I got to do is just let him have fun, and he does it. If I didn't have him, I would probably have lost a lot of sleep. I was very lucky, you know.
Okay. Questions? Okay, so we've got two very quiet people up here, so I'm going to ask them something. So I'm going to ask Tom first, and then we'll come to Joris. So you've seen their presentations. What have you seen from a vendor perspective that you could comment on about what they did and how they could do it better, or ways they could be helped?
Sure. Well, let me just start by categorizing companies in terms of their digital transformation efforts, because what I see out there is there's three different types of companies. Ones that are just getting started on their digital transformation journey. Mm-hmm. And these types of companies they lack resources, they don't have the skill sets, they may not even have a good strategy or vision. And so you have to go in there and assess what they're doing in terms of data readiness, infrastructure, leadership, culture, and they may not have the level of automation necessary, so they may have to improve their automation. They haven't digitized a lot of things, so you may have to go in and begin to digitize, like Marty's adopted procedural automation. That's digitizing manual processes, the standard operating procedures. It may also require some, you mentioned electronic logbooks. So it's just that digitization of the part of digital transformation. And then there were other companies that have done selective digitization, so that they may have done something along one domain. And typically those companies focus on the low-hanging fruit. It's asset management, monitoring the assets for reliability, and on rare occasions you might see trying to improve customer experience or supply chain optimization, but typically it's focused on the assets and maybe improving operations. So they may begin to aggregate data, use visualization and analytic tools to make for improved decision making. And then you've got companies like these two here that are doing more extensive digital transformation. So they've adopted a lot more technology. They're looking at systems that cross multiple department silos. They're looking to share that information to multiple people. And that's where more challenges come in. They're using multiple technologies, so they're looking at the fusion of different technologies. And that's where a company like ours can help with that challenge of integrating all of those different data sources, the workflows. We mentioned that there was a question here about culture, and that's one of the main obstacles that we see often is that, with the associated digitization, you want to do things differently to improve your performance, and that requires workflow changes, the way people operate, the way that they do things. And that's very, very challenging. People tend to resist that, especially when you're sharing across these silos. And people will resist that change, and so it takes training and education to get them over the resistance to that.
Mm-hmm. George?
I would say for projects like this, finding a right partner is the first step to go. We're here now for 3 days, and we hear a lot of topics passing by. It's the IT, OT, ET conversions, you have cybersecurity, digitization, asset performance management. So you can't be a subject matter expert in each of these subjects. So I would advise everybody starting on this journey or continuing or evaluating, find a partner who can help you, can help you define your business goals and define the needs in your project. This is something you see everywhere. Last weekend, I was to Cape Canaveral. There's NASA and SpaceX and Boeing. They are also partnering together to create rockets that they can land. It's no company these days is able to know everything that's going on in the industry, to have all the experts within their own company. This just doesn't exist anymore. So my major advice would be to find the right partner, and this is a great place to look for them. I think they're all here.
You have another question? No, you're just sitting next to the guy who kept asking questions.
That the app for questions and feedback is up and running. It was not running, but now we fixed it.
Oh, okay.
So
you
give
can
the session 5 stars.
How are we on time? Are we over? We're done. We timed that perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Everybody.